Hello and welcome to this Unified Communication Self-Training class GCS level. My name is Ilyas Nabran and I am a Regional Product Engineer here at Grandstream EMEA. I'm in charge of the Unified Communication and Collaboration solution. And in this class, we're going to learn how to deploy our high availability solution for both the UCM 6510 and the UCM 6300 series. And without further ado, let's get into this class. Failover and redundancy are very important for some businesses where the server must be constantly running. And to meet such requirements, Grandstream has released the HA100, which is a module designed to implement the high availability failover feature for our enterprise-grade IP-PBX, the UCM 6510. So in this class, we will learn about everything that concerns the HA100, its technical specification, its installation with the UCM 6510, and how to make it fully functional, and explain its failure management mechanism. Well, let's see what we offer on the high availability solution for both the UCM 6510 as well as the UCM 6300 series. And we can talk first about the HA100, which is a module designed to implement the high availability failover feature only for the UCM 6510. It is not meant to be implemented with the UCM 6300 series, because the UCM 6300 series has its own failover system, as we will see later in this class. The connection between the UCM 6510 and HA100 offers a breakthrough turnkey solution for converged voice, video, data, fax, surveillance, and mobility applications out of the box without any extra licensing fees or recurring costs. This makes HA100 an ideal complementary connector to the UCM 6510 for businesses that need a reliable UC system without any interruptions or failures. For high availability, we provide different solutions. For the UCM 6510, users can connect two UCM 6510 units to the HA100 to create a backup solution and automatically switch to a secondary UCM 6510 if the main one fails. For the UCM 6300 series and the UCM 6300 audio series, high availability feature is implemented within the UCM software, and no other products are needed when setting up the high availability. Well, let's start first with the HA100 for the UCM 6510. Let's talk about the HA100 technical specification. It connects and constantly monitors two UCM 6510 together for high availability. Smart failover solution that automatically switches to a hot standby secondary UCM 6510 if the primary one fails. Up to 14 LED indicators showing real-time status with all the telecom lines, network links, and auxiliary devices. Gratuitous ARP forces SIP endpoints to refresh the MAC address of the new UCM 6510 without interruptions. Fast 10 to 50 second system switching time depending on the number of registered endpoints. Now let's look at the distributions and the ports on the back panel and the front panel of the HA100. On the back panel, we have the following ports: two FXS and two FXO ports, a WAN port and a LAN port, two RS485 ports. On the front panel, we have the following ports: one pair of internal WAN ports, one pair of LAN ports, one pair of T1, E1, J1 ports, two pairs of internal FXS ports, two pairs of internal FXO ports. In a connection between HA100 and two UCM 6510 units, one UCM 6510 will function as the primary server and provide online services. The other UCM 6510 will function as a backup server and will not provide services until the primary server is down. Connect respectively the UCM line ports, FXO, phone port, FXS, E1, T1, J1 ports, WAN ports, and LAN ports to the HA100's respective ports, as you can see. Use the USB to RS485 serial cable to connect the UCM USB port to the RS485 port on the HA100. Connect respectively the second UCM line port, FXO, FXS, T1, E1, J1 port, WAN port, and LAN port to the HA100 respective ports. Use the USB to RS485 serial cable to connect the second UCM USB port to the RS485 port on the HA100. Use Ethernet cable to connect the heartbeat ports on the primary UCM to the secondary UCM. And there are two deployment methods for adding an HA100 and a secondary UCM 6510 to an existing UCM 6510 setup: backup and restore configuration, and it's done manually, backing up the primary UCM configuration and restoring it in the secondary UCM. And the second method is the synchronization of the configuration. It can be described as the automatic way of doing the backup, restore by syncing the two UCM's configuration. HA100 separates the external ports into the corresponding internal ports A and B only when UCM 6510 device is connected at any given time. When the two UCM 6510 units connect to an HA100 via port A and port B, the primary UCM 6510 will use the external ports on HA100 for data transmission. The HA100's RS485 port receives signaling from the UCM 6510 units to switch between port A and port B. If the internal port A on the HA100 is connected successfully to the corresponding port on primary UCM 6510, the LED indicator for port A on HA100 will be solid green. The primary UCM 6510 relies on HA100's external ports for connection. In this case, the LED indicator for port B on HA100 will not light up, and the backup UCM will be on standby. You should keep in mind that the whole system will go down if the master UCM and the slave UCM fail, or if the master UCM and the HA100 fail, which means that when only the HA100 is down, the system will continue working the same way with no interruption, since the primary UCM is functional. In the meantime, the UCM will detect that the HA100 has failed and will send a notification via email to the system administrator. Also, if the primary server detects issues within itself, it will signal the HA100 via USB to RS485 cable to switch connection from port A to port B. The backup server will then successfully connect and resume the service. If the primary server is suddenly down for any reason, the HA100 will automatically switch the connection from port A to port B, allowing the backup server to resume services with a minimal interruption time. In this slide, I put some very important notes to remember about our failover system. When primary-secondary switchover happens, active calls will be cut off and cannot be recovered. The calling party should obviously re-establish the call. Switchover will occur when WAN or LAN connection is lost. This is triggered immediately once the issue happens. From the UCM web interface, users can pre-configure some HA100 settings in order to well handle the switchover. These settings are the hardware scan and failure switchover. The hardware scan setting will allow you to select the hardware ports that will be detected for failure, and failure switchover settings will allow you to select the hardware ports to switch after failure is detected. What I mean is that the users can select, for instance, FXS ports hardware scan settings and not in the failure switchover setting. And in the case when there is a problem with FXO connection, the admin will only be alerted about the issue without performing the switchover. For FXS port failure scan, the UCM will perform switchover only when there is an FXS chip hardware error and not when an FXS cable is disconnected. In a scenario where there is a persistent issue that triggers constant switchover, no switchover will occur beyond the second one. And please note that data in external storage devices connected to the UCM will not be synchronized. If a switchover occurs and the secondary UCM assumes the master role, this UCM will remain master until there is another switchover, even when the UCM with the issue is back up and running, and it will be assigned the slave role. When upgrading UCM firmware, both UCM A and UCM B will be upgraded in the process. Both devices will reboot at the same time upon successful upgrade. And now let's talk about GrandStream high availability solution for the UCM 6300 series and the UCM 6300 All-U series. The UCM 6300 series comes equipped with a hot standby mechanism. This mechanism is embedded within the software of the UCM 6300 series. It allows to establish a redundancy protocol without having to rely on an external device. Hot standby offers a reliable solution to avoid a complete halt of the operations. Since hot standby allows switching to a backup UCM immediately after the primary UCM fails, the interruption time will be minimal and the production can be immediately recovered from the point it was interrupted. There are some prerequisites that should be taken into consideration which allow setting high availability. The two UCM model number must be identical. Both UCMs should be connected directly using the heartbeat port using an Ethernet cable. The network method configured should be switch mode. Also, the IP of both UCMs should be set statically. The configuration of the primary UCM will be synchronized once HA has been configured. Any subsequent configuration or generated data will be synchronized in real time. And then once the UCM has rebooted, the users can check the status of the HA on the user interface of the UCM to see if it has been set successfully and to also see if the UCM is on active or standby role. And the following network topology illustrates a typical deployment of the UCM 6300 in hot standby in relation with other network equipment.